Good morning, everyone. Welcome to round 2 of Idaho's Charter School Program Grant, Bloom's Communities of Excellence. I'm going to give a quick introduction to our webinar today, and then I'm going to be joined by my colleagues here at Bloom, as well as the Idaho Public Charter School Commission staff. So I'll start. My name is Amy Felton-Toth. I am Bloom's Director of Federal Grants and Support. And I just want you to take a look at the screen and just notice there are 2 very important email addresses at the bottom for contact information. At any time, if you have a question, you can reach me at grantscsp@bloom.org, or if you have a finance-related question about the grant, you can email us at financecsp@bloom.org. Today's webinar should be pretty quick. We're not going to go into full depth how to apply and the rubric today, but we are going to give a quick overview, and we will have natural breaks for Q&A. However, the participants are muted. If you do have questions, we're going to ask you to use the little Q&A chat box, and my assistant, Mark, is going to be monitoring those. We'll all be monitoring those. So we'll be able to have, like I said, natural breaks for questions. So we're just going to get started with the first couple of slides we need to go through. First we'll start, well, I guess we'll do introductions first. Terry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Amy, thank you very much. I'm Terry Ryan, and I'm, what am I? I'm the CSP Project Director and Bloom CEO. And it's a pleasure to be speaking with you all today.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kirsten Koga, and I'm the Senior Accountability Program Manager at the Public Charter School Commission.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it, Kirsten.
You're welcome. I'm Mark Rignon, the CFO for Bloom.
Awesome. So now we'll just briefly go over the agenda and some federal language right at the start to get us all awake. Oh, back up one. All right, so today we're going to have, like I said, the introduction in federal language. Terry's going to give us a CSP overview with some definitions and the questions that you'll need to ask yourself to see if you're eligible to apply. Terry and Mark are going to go into a little bit what the peer reviewers will be looking for. Mark will go over some grant logistics and some brief finance training. And then I'll finish up the call with technical assistance information and the timeline. Again, because this is the webinar and it's introductory, it's not the in-person mandatory session. We will not do an in-depth finance training. But some of you have already signed up for those in-person events, so you'll be able to take advantage of that. All right, next slide. So applications are due Wednesday, October 16th at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The application is open right now. If you navigate to our website, you'll see that, and you'll see that on the bottom of this page here. Bloom.org, Idaho CSP grant. The apply button is now live, and that will be active until Wednesday, October 16th at 5 p.m. And again, these are the contact email addresses for our team. If you have program questions, you can direct those to Terry. Fiscal budget questions go to Mark, and then RFA, which is our request for application specific questions, go to me. Next slide. All right, so this is just a very quick overview of our program. It's a competitive charter school grant program funded under ESSA. And it's non-sectarian. A public charter school is non-sectarian in its programs, admissions, policies, employment practices, and all other operations, and is not affiliated with a sectarian school or religious institution. Public charter schools are open to all students who apply and cannot charge tuition. A charter school receiving CSP funds must use a lottery if more students apply for admissions to the charter school than can be admitted.
And we actually have to read this to you. So this is why we're doing it. So thank you. Be patient.
So this one I will not read.
I think you're supposed
Oh,
to, actually.
okay.
Yeah.
And we were just joined by Scott Parker. We'll just go back to introductions for a minute. Scott, would you just like to introduce yourself to folks? I think you had a little bit of traffic this morning.
Hi, I'm Scott Parker. I'm new to Bloom this year, and I'm happy to join this conversation.
And Scott is our Director of District and Charter Relationships. So I'm sure some of you will be hearing more from him in the future. We got some great stuff planned. All right, so I will read the ESSA background, Part 1. Authorized by Title V, Part B, Subpart 1 of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Act of 1965. The Federal Charter Schools Program provides funding to state entities with the purpose to expand opportunities for all students, particularly traditionally underserved students, to attend public charter schools and meet challenging state academic standards, provide financial assistance for the planning, program design, and initial implementation of charter schools, increase the number of high-quality charter schools available to students across the United States, evaluate the impact of charter schools on student achievement, families, and communities, share best practices between charter schools and other public schools, encourage states to provide facility support to charter schools, and support efforts to strengthen the charter school authorizing process. Mark, do you want to read the next one? Part 2?
Part 2. So, the CSP State Entities Program provides financial assistance to state entities to support charter schools that serve elementary and secondary school students in a given state. Under this program, recipient state entities, which is us, make subgrants to eligible applicants for the purpose of opening new public charter schools and replicating and expanding high-quality public charter schools. Grant funds may also be used to provide technical assistance to eligible applicants and authorized public chartering agencies in opening new charter schools and replicating and expanding high-quality charter schools, and to work with authorized public chartering entities to improve authorizing quality, including developing capacity for and conducting fiscal oversight and auditing of charter schools. Public charter schools receiving sub-grant funds under the CSP State Entities Program also may serve students in early childhood education programs or post-secondary students.
Thank you, Mark.
You're a very good reader.
Yeah.
Okay, Terry, take it away.
Thank you. And we will go fast because we know you guys are all busy and that you're going to come to our in-person thing. Thank you, Amy, for setting this up. It is pretty exciting, though, to say this is an act of Congress that we're actually involved in helping to be a part of. It seems kind of a big deal, I guess, when you think of it that way. But the charter school program enables subgrants to open and prepare for the operation of new high-quality schools, and it also provides resources for replication and expansion of existing schools. And so it's right in line with the things that you all care about and are working on. So we're happy you're on this call. Our consortium is a partnership of 5 partners. Bloom is the project lead, and the money actually flows through us. And then we have the J.A. and Catherine Albertson's Family Foundation. They actually are the ones that are paying most of the costs associated with this program. For example, neither Mark or I receive a nickel from the federal grant. So we're an in-kind support to this program, which, by the way, is becoming a more common model in the United States. A couple states received CSP funding just this month. Washington State and Alabama, and both are organizations that are nonprofits running it. So I think we're at the edge of something pretty interesting and exciting. The Idaho State Board of Education is another important partner involved in this. Matt Freeman's been a good ally and friend to this work from the very beginning. Kirsten is here from the Idaho Public Charter School Commission. They have been the lead authorizer and supporter of this work with us from the very beginning as well. And then on the facility side, Building Hope, whom some of you may know, is a partner we've been working with not only on this project, but all the work we've been doing since 2013. The CSP competition was competitive in 2018. There were $400 million in funds allocated, and 8 states won. Idaho was one of those. We received a grant award of about $17 million. The rationale for this, and I think this rationale is still relevant, is that basically we can't build seats fast enough in this state, especially in our fastest growing communities like Meridian, like Idaho Falls. We also have a well-established charter program in this state, over 20 years. The first charter school opened. And there's, in Idaho, really strong support and public demand for charters. And that is something that is increasingly unique to our state and a few other western states. So that was the logic we made for why Idaho should receive the federal funds. This is really kind of the core of what we're talking about, and it's highlighted. We had three goals, and the one that we really want to spend time with you all on is increasing the number of quality charter school seats by 8,200 students, and especially for our educationally disadvantaged students and our rural students. And we'll talk more about kind of how we're trying to target those student populations a little bit more. There's also support that has been made available for things like technical assistance, evaluation, and dissemination, but we won't spend time on that right now. Next slide, thank you. Again, we're talking about new schools, replications, and expansions. So new charter school approved in a planning year, first year of operations. It's a new LEA. That's how we're talking about this. The replication is open a new charter school at campus under an existing LEA charter agreement based upon the educational model of an existing high-quality charter school. We give Idaho Arts as an example of that. They expanded a couple years ago, and that's precisely how they went about doing it. Expansion of a high-quality charter school, that is significantly increase enrollment or add more grades to a high-quality existing school. Compass Public Charter School in Meridian is an example of that, where they came to us and said, we've got demand, we need to add about 350 more seats to their existing school. If you have any questions on that, feel free to ask. We realized it got a little blurred last time between the replication and new, and so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. The definitions for startup schools, I hate to read slides to you, but you know, it's pretty straightforward here. Committed board of trustees, that there's a quality instructional leader or leadership team in place, and a real demonstrated ability to attract talent to the school to work for your model, a sustainable business plan, and evidence that there's actually market demand for what you're doing, that there will be students and families that want what you're doing, a well-conceived facility plan that you actually are able to convince reviewers that you are going to have a home for the school that will work and work financially. And we're really looking for innovative models that can bring something different. We've had different moments where we had lawmakers and others say, we don't want charters that just do the same old, same old. We really do want things to be different and innovative. And we think the first go around in our competition, we did a pretty good job of that. And pretty sure that the folks on this call are going to deliver on it this time around as well. This is important, defined and clear transportation plan for students. That is something that's actually baked in the federal statute, and that's something that matters. I believe that's something that matters also to the Idaho Public Charter School Commission and to the state more generally. The replication expansion, so existing evidence that the school is performing well. We look at things like test scores and both growth and proficiency. We want to know from your authorizer, if it's the commission or if it's a district, that your school is in compliance with all the sort of basic things that you need to be in compliance with, that a successful school is able to do. That you're increasing student achievement, and there's a number of different ways we can talk about that. Some of those are listed there. That you're in good standing with your authorizer and lenders, and Amy may say more about this, if not on this call, when we meet in person, but there's actually a little form to be filled out. There's evidence of a student wait list, that if you're going to expand or you're going to replicate, that there's actually evidence for a need for you to do so. And we really are believe in the importance of both strong and stable leadership and governance as an indicator of school quality. That the people involved are people who've been involved in what you're doing for some time now. I think Mark said it or Amy said it, this is a competitive grant process. There is a third-party review part we'll talk more about later. You must be approved by a state-sanctioned authorizer, be that the Idaho Public Charter School Commission or a school district, or if one of you negotiate an agreement with a public college or university, but that has not happened yet in this state. We will fund, go ahead.
Can I add on that?
Yeah.
So, and some of our applicants are working on some pretty tight deadlines on this, but basically, you cannot complete the CSP grant application at the end of this process unless you have that charter approved. So just note that timing for a few of the
You must have an approved charter petition from a state-sanctioned public charter school authorizer to apply for this grant.
Yep.
And thank you. That's, I think, as clear as we can make it.
Yep.
And that's really an important point. Thank you for that, Mark. The other really important point here is a rigorous third-party review process. This is a process, and we don't, the staff sitting around this table don't make the decisions on who is selected. That is a third-party review process. Go next slide, please.
So before we go to the next
Yep.
section, I'm just going to take a little quick break to see if there's any questions. And we do have a question from Barb. Is a school eligible if it has been approved by an authorizer, but doesn't open until the fall of 2021? So I think Mark has an answer for that.
Yeah. The official answer, we actually worked on this recently. The official answer is that you cannot apply this round. You'll have to wait till the 2020 round. The way that the federal government has defined this is you can have up to an 18-month planning period. So if you are opening, let's say, September 1, 2021, if you roll back 18 months, that would be around March 2020, which means the October grant award would not fit within that time period. So unfortunately, I know this applies to several of the potential applicants that you will have to apply the next round.
And we may have a supplemental round in the spring of 2020 if there are dollars left over from the October 2019 competition. However, we don't know for certain if we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But that's where we've landed.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. So next we're going to hop into what peer reviewers are looking for.
Well, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because this is actually what we're going to spend most of our time on when we get together in person with folks on this call and others. We're going to spend, what I would strongly encourage is that you look closely at the document that is our request for applications and specifically go to the rubric section, which begins on page 39 in that document, and really make yourself comfortable and aware with the rubric. And what we would love is that when we see you in person, that you actually come with your questions and your concerns when we meet.
Yeah, so the next slide is going to just focus, like Terry said, we're going to go in depth in the in-person sessions, but just so you know
how we think about it and how the reviewers think about it.
Right, here are some verbs that you need to watch out for in the rubric. Mark, did you want to talk about that a little bit too? I think you had a couple points you wanted to make.
As Terry says, we'll dive more deeply into this when we meet with you in person, but it is important that, and we'll spend, one of the things in the training that we'll spend some time on is we've actually done training for the peer reviewers, and we'll basically share with you what they've learned and what they understand from this process. So we're really parallel. And the key is, as Amy is saying, is these are key components. Your writing has to relate very clearly what you're doing to what the reviewers are looking for in the rubric. So we're going to keep pounding this rubric.
Yeah. And that'll be,
You need to understand it.
and so really, really look at the rubric ahead of time, be prepared for questions when we meet with you. And the final thing is that you can actually go to the Bloom website and see the 5 grant applications that received funding last go-around. And I'll just say, when we wrote our federal version of this to the U.S. Department of Education, we learned a lot from the states that had received funding in earlier competitions. There's nothing wrong with that, and I actually strongly encourage you to look at the winners from the previous competition. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this right now. This is the rubric, and these are the issues we'll talk about when we're together. I think we're together with some of you later today. Again, if you can, make yourself as aware of this as you possibly can, so we can really have a good conversation with you as to how we think you can best tackle these different targets. Go ahead, next.
Yeah, and a key to see here is the weight, and to see like where the majority of the points are. And they are in the educational philosophy. They are in, if you look at the highest scoring sections, effectively serving all students, and board capacity and governance structure are the top 3.
Okay, go. Awesome.
And I just wanted to say one thing, is that you must have a minimum score of 85.
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Okay, Mark, take it away.
Oh, this is me. All right, this is really quick. Just know that of the $17 million, at least 90% needs to go to the sub-grantees. And that's how the grant is designed. We are also required to provide at least 7% of that $17 million in technical assistance. Some of this is earmarked to help the Public Charter School Commission help us provide technical assistance and new school support. We cannot spend more than 3% for administration, so our budget is actually less than that. As Terry mentioned, that means that a lot of the work is actually supported by the Albertsons Family Foundation through Bloom to support managing the grant. So, kind of recapping our competitive process, there will be 4 competitions. We had the first competition in March. There were 6 available sub-grants, and we only were able to award 5. Only 5 applicants met the cut score. So we're rolling one of those remaining grants into this competition, which means that there are now 7 available sub-grants for up to $800,000. And again, if we do not have applicants that score well enough to receive the grants, some will roll forward into the October 2020 competition, or as Terry mentioned, because we had 2 grant applications so close together, we may have a spring competition if it makes sense. In October, there will be 5 plus any that are open in October 2020, and then there'll be 2 sub-grants available in 2021. Key things to know about the periods that you can apply for the grant. You may apply for up to 18 months of planning and up to 24 months of implementation, with the constraint or the understanding that planning means the period before the first day of school. So for ease of reference, you basically, whenever you think you're going open the school, you count back. You can use up to 18 months before that of planning. And we understand that because the awards right now are being made in October, your planning period is from your
a year.
It's a little under a year of planning that's available, which is why if we do a competition in the spring, it might provide a little more flexibility for some schools. So we'll be taking a look at that after we see the results of this competition. We'll go into detail. We have a nice allowable cost guide, but I'll kind of fly through these slides of the key allowable activities. Preparing teachers, school leaders, and specialized instructional support personnel, including paying payroll, hiring, compensating, providing professional development. There's a whole area where you can acquire supplies, training, equipment, which includes technology, educational materials, including the acquisition of curriculum and other required materials for both teachers and students. There's a couple sections that are very specific to the planning period and are limited in your ability to use them. One of them is this subsection that allows the carrying out of necessary renovations to ensure that a new school building complies with applicable statutes and regulations and minor facilities repairs. So it cannot be construction, but there is certainly an ability, let's say that this especially applies for startups. If you were to be renovating a facility and there's some code required costs that you need in order to be able to open the school, those could be paid for through this grant. The second one, also very restricted, is one-time startup costs associated with providing transportation to students. This is only in the planning phase. This is before the first day you open the school. There is the ability to use the federal funds to help develop your transportation plan, which does include purchasing school buses. So that is an available activity. This should be fairly standard, carrying out community engagement activities. Both staff and student recruitment is allowable. And providing for other appropriate non-sustained costs related to opening, replicating, or expanding a high-quality.
So, Mark, give real-life examples, because we now have schools that have gone through this. And what are we seeing that they're reimbursed? What's mostly that they're seeking money to reimburse?
Depending on the school, some of the schools put a lot of their request into curriculum, into furniture, getting furniture more aligned with their how they were going to develop their school, and technology. So, for example, some schools may, without the federal grant, may be using used equipment. They may be looking at other sources of cheap furniture. With the federal grant, they are able to ensure they have, new furniture, new technology available. On the staffing side, the key that you see in that bottom one, and this is where we're going to focus when we look at when your budgets are looked at in detail, is that the key is to have the non-sustained costs. So an example given is if you are hiring a math teacher, that is really a required position in your school, and that's a sustained cost. That's a cost you would have in the future. You wouldn't be able to pay for that math teacher through the federal grant. However, if you're developing an innovative STEM program, for example, and you want to hire professionals to develop curriculum, develop the program, really have those startup activities, although those individuals may end up in the future teaching those classes, technically those initial costs are not sustained costs. They're initial planning and development costs. One of the ways that you might see is, for example, we've had applicants who were not going to hire a counselor until the third or fourth year of operation without the federal grant, but now because the federal grant provides them support to bring those positions in earlier, they've built in those positions into the federal grant because it allows them to do that where they otherwise would not have been able to pay for those costs with their operating funds.
So there is quite a bit of flexibility in there, actually, and that's the sort of thing that having conversations with you can lead to some pretty creative solutions.
And speaking of questions, if anybody has any questions, I'm just going to remind you that the Q&A window is available. If you wanted to just type in some questions, we'll do our best to answer those on the call. Again, we'll be able to answer more in-depth more specific to your situation questions in the in-person mandatory training, or you can also reach out to us with the contact information we gave you earlier.
Next slide.
And again, just key, like, clear restrictions: cannot be for any construction, can't build buildings. Our application is a contract. We are held accountable for what we wrote in the grant, so we are going to be very careful to ensure that spending is in compliance with all federal rules and regulations. Some of the funny little things that we have to make sure that you know: funding cannot be redirected for other uses. The funding can't flow through to a traditional public school that is not charters. And finally, specific in the law and the way this is designed, we are unable to provide funding to virtual charter schools through this program.
And then the next slide, we're going to have some some summary, but some really important reminders. Do you want to?
I should go, yeah. Yeah. You want me to continue? No problem. Yeah, competitive grant process.
Yeah.
We can only fund high-quality plans. Grant determinations are made through a third-party review process. Terry and I and staff here, again, have no say in the scoring of the grant. So your writing is very important here, of how you write the grant and how you address the scoring in the rubric. There's no guarantee that submitting a proposal will result in funding or that funding will be provided at the requested level. The costs you put into your plan, the peer reviewers are not going to make judgments as to whether they're allowable or not. They will simply ensure that your fiscal plan is aligned with your school's plan. But after you receive the award, there will be a process where we will review the budgets and ensure that everything that's been requested is allowable and reasonable.
And
there may be adjustments.
One more thing on that. I mean, this is important because I know there are some smaller rural schools that are going to be applying, and we will work to figure out what the appropriate grant amount should be. But for example, if we have a school that may be applying in the eastern part of the state that's going to serve maybe 30 students, obviously our grant won't be $800,000 to that school. It'll be some sort of prorated amount, and we have a pretty good idea of how that's going to work in practice. But just be aware that if you are coming to us from a smaller school, one, you're still eligible. Two, the dollar amounts are going to be less than $800,000.
And again, the key criteria that flows through to us from the federal government is whether the expenses, first, are allowable, they fit a category that is defined as an allowable expense, and two, is reasonable. And that does have some judgment in it, but as you all probably know, most of you already receive federal funds through the State Department of Education. All those same rules apply. And so we'll be looking for the reasonableness and whether those costs make sense and align with your school plan. If more schools meet the criteria to be funded, then there are funds available. Applications get ranked by score, and we have to make final decisions about which schools are funded. So it really starts at the top score, works its way down. Again, big bold type, please read the request for application document carefully. Please make sure you tell your story well and clearly. Again, we can't control the reviewers and how whether or not they find the evidence in your writing to support how they score a certain rubric component. So it is really imperative that you make that important.
Okay, before we move on, we have a couple of questions. We have a question from Rachel. She would like to know what are some typical sources of funding for new construction of school facilities?
That's a whole conversation.
Yes, I was going to say that is a whole conveation. So yeah, we probably won't be able to cover that now, but if...
No, I think that that's a good question offline. This is, it really relates to our partnerships with Building Hope. Building Hope is the organization that helps most of the schools we work with in Idaho in determining those sources of funding, but it's typically lending. It's not typically grants like this federal grant.
Well, be clear, this federal grant cannot be used for funding facilities, as Mark has said, but it's important to not confuse anybody that this is not about facilities. This is actually about programmatic dollars.
So there's a question from Shay. Will the same peer review group review each of the grant award cycles, or will it be a different peer review group each cycle?
So we have a mix. We've made a couple decisions here. One is some of the reviewers we had last go-around are going to be a part of the review process this go-around as well. However, we've added, what, Amy, 3 or 4 new reviewers. We also made a decision, and this was a decision that was based on just experience, really, of the last go-around, is that we're going to have 3 reviewers instead of just 2. We think this is a more balanced and fair approach to the review process. It also distributes the work a little better for the reviewers. It's a lot of work that they do, and they have to do a lot of reading, and the last go-around was a very tight timeline. This time they have, I think, a week or 2 more to actually do the review. But in answer to the question, yes, some of the same folks are involved, but additional folks are involved, and the process has gone from 2 reviewers to 3.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to a little bit about our technical assistance. Earlier in the webinar, we talked about Bloom's 3 grant objectives. Those are the things that we're focused on, you know, in our accountability to the federal government. So one of the things that we are working on with you is providing technical assistance throughout this process. I think Mark alluded to the fact that 7% of the total funding that we receive must be utilized for state-level activities. So we've outlined some of what Bloom's plan is here. And before I talk about that and have Terry jump in, I just want to remind you also that if you are awarded, there will be things that there are expectations that you'll participate in these activities that we're providing for you. Again, we're, go ahead, Terry.
Sorry.
Yep.
This is, so thank you, Ms. Perfect. We've got things that are further developed now than it was when we created this slide. So we actually have Boise State University is engaged and working with us on the research and evaluating the impact of charter schools on student achievement. And we're excited about that relationship, and it's ongoing and developing. We also have a outstanding group that is going to be doing focus groups with school leaders, teachers, ultimately parents, I think students, and that's coming along. In terms of technical assistance, what you're getting right now is deemed technical assistance. One of the things that we promised, and it's really important to us, is that what we do with the schools that are fortunate enough to garner these grant dollars is actually something that is relevant and significant to not only the schools that get the grant support, but charter schools more generally, and even possibly traditional district schools where that might make sense. So the professional development side of this, the technical assistance side of this, and we're game to partner, and we are partnering. I mentioned to you Boise State University. We have other partners that we're having conversations with, both what you'd call national partners as well as in-state partners. But the idea here is that the lessons learned and some of the resources that we develop not only are beneficial to the schools that receive the federal grant support, but to charters more generally, and like I say, public education more generally.
And one of the really great examples for that is the session that we had. We had the civil rights event. Some of you attended that. And so, again, that's like Terry said, it was a technical assistance workshop with state and national experts. And we also actually sent out a survey ahead of time, gathering feedback from you if there were any hot topics that you wanted to look at during that session. And so we're definitely going to be providing more opportunities for that.
But this really is a community of practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole idea here, is that we all learn from each other, that whatever we do in terms of technical assistance is actually something you all value and want. Now, that gets a little tricky when you've got to do it across multiple schools, and they all may be in a different place, either in terms of where they are in their development or in terms of their curriculum, whatever the case may be. But we're trying hard to do this in a way that makes sense and is of high quality. And we are working with Kirsten and the commission as well to incorporate as much as we can kind of their input and ways that what we do is useful to other schools also.
All right, so we have a question, Mark. I think this is more your answer, your arena, because I think it's actually a financial question. Our school has opened since the last CSP grant application period. Will our application need to be significantly different because of this? I think this is a budget question.
I can, knowing your school, I can say yes, because there were different objectives of the grant that will matter. So you do need to tailor the grant specifically to where you are in the process. So you are eligible to apply for this grant if you are in what we call your year 0 or your year 1. If your school is open, you are in year 1. Which means you cannot have any planning activities. The planning period is over, which is typically the period before the school opens. There is a wrinkle to that, in that if you were an existing school but you were planning a replication or expansion of that school, then yeah, your planning period can happen because you're planning for the next school. But in the case of a one-site school that is now open, if the grant is not being used to replicate a second school or to significantly expand the existing school based on a new approval of seats, then you are now in your implementation period.
Let me just say one thing, that having been somebody who's written a federal grant, several of them actually, and someone who's actually read as a grant reader, you really want to tell your story in a way that people want to read it. And you want it to be as interesting as you can make it. And you all have interesting stories to tell as to why you're doing. But when we first applied for the federal CSP grant, we wrote it as if it were some technical manual. And then going back and rereading it, it was hard to read. And the one that got funded was actually a story. And so you need to get the balance between making sure you connect all the dots, but also tell the story of your school in a way that's compelling to readers, understanding they're going to be reading other grants. And make sure that you take it as seriously where there's not spelling errors, grammatical errors that take people off target. And this is advice we heard from the reviewers, and it's something that we've seen personally, that write it in a way that you actually want people to read it.
And I think Terry made a really great suggestion before, going to our website and looking at the grants that were, the subgrantees that were funded in the first round. You can actually, it's the same rubric, so you guys all have a copy of that. It's also available on our website. Take the rubric out, starting on page 39, and go through one of the awarded applicants and see if you can see where the peer reviewers were scoring those sections. Okay, so before we move on, all right, I thought there was another question, but there's not. And again, if you come up with questions that you have later on after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us at the contact information we've provided. So we'll move on to just some other contact information. And this is the United States Department of Education. This is the Office of Innovation and Improvement. And as Terry said, we wrote our project narratives, and these were the folks that had their own peer review panel that reviewed our narrative.
The numbers are a little dated now.
Yeah, the numbers are dated, yeah. So this is from the 2018 awards page link, but I think if you follow that link, you'll see that 3 states were awarded as well. It was Alabama, I forget the other 2.
It was Alabama, Washington State, and...
But you can see that our process mimics their process where they had a peer review panel, and you can also see that the award winners, the narratives were posted to the site. And it was very helpful for Terry and I to look at those because we weren't awarded the first time we submitted our narrative.
No, but I mean, we learned a ton.
Yes, we did learn a ton. So definitely use what's available for you. And the next slide is the Idaho State Board of Education, one of our partners in the Communities of Excellence. And as Terry said, Matt Freeman's been super supportive. All right, and then we have the Idaho Public Charter School Commission contact information. I'm going to give Kirsten an opportunity if she wants to say anything. What's the best way to contact the commission if they have questions? Or they should probably already know that.
They should contact me if they have questions about this.
Awesome. And there's your contact information. Again, the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available to registrants. And we also emailed you this presentation, I believe. Next slide is the Idaho State Department of Education. And most of you know that there was a Charter Start 101 workshop. If you don't know that, that would be something, if you're just starting out, that you would want to contact Michelle Clement-Taylor and register to sign up for that. And again...
Can I just jump in on that?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
While those are not technically, while those Charter Start workshops are not technically required, they provide so much valuable information for preparing for a charter application. So we strongly encourage all folks to attend those workshops. Michelle is a great resource. Be sure to use it.
Yeah, and I think every one of us in this room has attended the 2-day session.
We would agree with everything that you said.
Yeah, and you can learn a lot. All right, so to wrap things up, here's our timeline. Again, the application is open on our website, and we will be having an in-person training this afternoon. Tomorrow we'll be in Idaho Falls and Twin Falls doing in-person sessions, and then Friday in Post Falls.
Just on that, again, those of you who are going to attend in person, please feel encouraged to ask us a lot of questions rather than us talking to you. I don't like this format of us as talking, and much prefer engagement. And so if you come ready with questions, concerns, that I think would make these conversations more fruitful for you and us.
Okay, and then the RFP will close on Wednesday, October 16th at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. The review should be finalized Friday, November 1st, and then we'll go into a management review, and then notice of awards will be Friday, November 15th. If you are awarded, we'll need you to do some post-award tasks and schedule an individual completeness check, and we'll go through a budget training with subgrantees, and then money will begin to be dispersed in December. And then again, round 3 will be in 2020. So next slide. And again, this is just a repeat of what we showed you before, the due date for the applications and our contact information for any questions that you might have. So I'm just going to look and see if anybody has any questions, if you could type them in, but I don't see any. So with that, I think we're going to close unless anybody else has comments.
Goodbye.
Last chance.
See you soon.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Have a great day.